Hidden Object Guru here, joined by...
The Unabridged Gamer. I'm trying to get something that's vaguely 1920s-esque, but I can't sing.
That's tough, yeah. No, I get it. We're here to talk Alone in the Dark briefly, and I have a question for you. Do you know what's going on in this game?
Pretty sure.
Okay, good. Whew. I'm a big fan of the original, and I'm watching this one, and it's kind of strange because I kept thinking as I was playing it, are they going to be pulling this nonsense where we're all just people in an insane asylum and, none of it mattered? And the answer is no, they're not. But they pretend that's what they're doing briefly.
Well, I think they kind of were obligated to because there's still people debating Shutter Island to this day.
Right, okay. And yeah, that was obviously something they were thinking about. Like, Shutter Island was so clearly a touch point for this game's story development. With the investigators coming to look for this person there. And then, of course, it turns out if you, depending on how much you believe that one part, I guess you were a person who stayed here briefly? You see what I mean by it's not clear, right?
Far as the, I don't know how much we want to get into spoilers right now or not, but
we don't have to do spoilers immediately.
Okay,
it's gonna come up.
Yeah, no, it's like, far as that room, I feel like it's open to implication because there's just such a rotating number of people coming in and out, plus the amount of names that we learn about but never actually get to see face to face due to the extenuating circumstances.
Right.
I feel like that's very intentional ambiguity. Like, they were very much going for that as not necessarily trying to confirm any one thing there. And that is something that, in general, I really feel like, they were going for. And if there is, something other than the actual in the text story going on, I much prefer the one ending's explanation as opposed to, just going the whole, you're just a patient here.
I know, right? We'll talk about my favorite ending later. Okay, so let's just do some general on the thoughts on the game first. For me, I think this game is really hurt by how garbage its combat is.
I mean, it's perfectly pedestrian and fine.
I just found all the combat to be completely weightless. I think the enemy encounters are not well designed. I think all of the maps are too small and the enemies are too fast and the weapons don't stagger them in a proper fashion. I think it's bad that
You weren't able to stagger them?
I mean, a little, but when there's 3 guys attacking you at once, it doesn't really matter. Every melee weapon you can get crumbles after hitting somebody like twice. I mean, I'm just happy there were enough bullets in the game.
I did not have any of these issues.
Really?
I was able to juggle enemies fine. I typically kept melee weapons together because I mainly used them as interrupts. And yeah, I had an excess typically of bullets and healing potions for the longest time until later in the game. The only part of the combat I would complain about is the one boss fight, the only one with a health bar, which it's weird that there's only one with a health bar.
Yeah, that was a strange choice to put a health bar on that guy.
I gotta believe it was a very late stage. We have no time otherwise to fix this kind of solution because of how out of nowhere it is, given just how atmospheric they try to be with everything else.
Oh, completely.
he managed to get a lucky shot on me literally at the very bottom of his health bar and kill me, so I had to do the entire boss
Oh
fight again. But
no.
between, the opportunity throws with the Molotovs and hitting weak points with your guns, like, I didn't really have any issues. Maybe it's just because I have been playing a lot of over-the-shoulder third-person horror shooters lately. It's been something that I've really had to focus on. But yeah, I actually did pretty well. To be clear, I'm not saying that the combat's great or anything. This is
Yeah.
not a game where I want a challenge mode. Hell, I'd say Hydrophobia has better actual
Okay.
feeling combat, for crying out loud. But it was very much perfectly serviceable. And here's my really interesting take. I don't usually get to say about a horror game. I'm actually glad that it wasn't as constant as the trailers make you expect it to be. Like,
Yeah.
they actually managed to make other gameplay elements with depth of at least equivalent, if not greater amounts. And that is often the problem with a lot of horror games that just get rid of the combat entirely. They're just like, okay, well, you're just going to run and hide now, and you're going to do this one very quick pop quiz, and every time you fail, you get to just start it all over again. Whereas Alone in the Dark is like, no, we're going to actually reward you for paying attention to clues. You're going to have to look at your journal and everything and figure out what information is relevant. I know some people would be taking notes, but I didn't have any scraps of paper on me, so I'm literally taking pictures with my phone to make notes for myself for various bits of information to get more of the lore and everything. And I really, really appreciated that. I liked that exploration and puzzle solving felt like equals, because I'm sorry, but they just don't in something like, say, Resident Evil 2 Remake or anything like that. They're
No,
just
that's
there
true.
as a pace breaker, whereas here, no, the combat is a pace breaker.
I think that's accurate. For me, there were puzzles in the game, and that was kind of nice. I did enjoy having having to go to the book to, like, I wonder what the code could be. And you can just open up Jeremy's journal. And he's like, oh, of course he wrote it in his journal. Why would he not write it in his journal? But so few games today would expect you to just, read a book for a code. It did feel nice, and it was respecting my time and expecting me to pay attention to the game in a way that I think a lot of games don't.
And crucially, while there is a journal to read, it's not like Uncharted where it's just like, here is the absolute solution for everything. It's
No.
more like, here is the one vital step you need to then interpret your own solution.
Yeah. One thing I liked, though, there was a moment where I skipped a puzzle, essentially. So you can get back from, I don't know, it's 2/3 of the way through the game. You got to open a safe in it's when you get back in the staff room, or the place where they keep the drugs. And so you've just gotten back from Egypt. And so you've got the contract with the Dark Man, which, is clearly just a treatment plan from a therapist. Like, they did not, if they wanted it to have two meanings, they did not write it carefully. Like, it could not more obviously just be a therapist treatment plan. But anyway, so I'm reading that, and 90% of it is blacked out, right? Mm-hmm. But one thing you can read is Jeremy's patient intake number. And it's 3 digits. And I'm like, well, that's probably the code to the safe. And so the minute I got back, I opened the safe, and I skipped the whole going and finding the document that tells you the safe code by just looking at the single new piece of paper I had gotten and assuming, well, that's probably the code. And I just found it interesting that there are 2 different places in the game where you can find that code. And that isn't something I see a lot. And again, it's rewarding the player for paying attention and thinking laterally. That said, it also screwed up the game because permanently, I had the mode on where it tells you where, places you haven't investigated are. And so the room where I was supposed to get the document that tells me what the code is never like never stopped being lit up for the rest of the game because I had never actually gone and gotten the clue, even though I had moved the game forward. So that was nice.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I did have that too. Also, at one point where the game's like, or maybe I do have the answer. It's like, actually, I haven't got grabbed that one hint. Let me go look around here a little bit. But the fact that that only happened to me like once or twice across the entire game is still just really impressive because, um, here's the thing: a lot of people don't know about me.
Please.
Um, Typically when you play games as a hobby, the association is when you're younger, you want to play the actiony stuff, you want to be all active and kind of stuff like that, and it's when you're older that you feel more inclined towards, the slower paced stuff, the stuff that's, a lot more thoughtful and everything. I have actually had the exact opposite experience.
Yeah.
Like as a kid, I played friggin' Europa Universalis. Um, I did not care how long the thing took because I was, an only child living in the middle of nowhere. I had the time. Whereas now it's like, you know what? I would like to actually progress the plot at some point, thanks. So it's really refreshing to have something that feels like the old school adventure games and such that I used to play, but it actually respects my time enough that I very rarely hit a wall, a very genuine wall. Um, that was, and even when I did, it didn't immediately make me annoyed because, like, there's one game that I have promised another friend that I will finish. I won't spoil what it is because I do want to actually still talk about it because there's some interesting stuff.
Okay.
But it's an adventure game, and my word, it was really hard to get into it when I did a puzzle right and I still got the wrong outcome because of a glitch, because it's a game where you can fail a puzzle. And it was like, this is why I stopped playing adventure games. This is why I've started playing games that go pew pew, because at least when I hit someone in the head, I know it's actually going to consistently recognize that. So
Unless
again,
it's an Ubisoft shooter.
Well, yes. Yes.
That's a good point. I'm not going to debate with that. Like, as games try to get more clever with this kind of stuff, I often run into issues that I think are related to what you're talking about, where it's tough to understand how to communicate with the game as you're delving further into. Now, back in the day, the issue was, and I'm talking back in the day, there were text adventures, and you would get into this bind where you knew exactly what you wanted to do, but because you don't know how the game's text parser works, you don't know what word it's going to recognize. So you physically don't know what to type in the keyboard to make the program understand what you want to do. That's, by the way, why LucasArts games and the Scum engine were such a revelation, because suddenly you just had verbs in front of you. Right? You had verbs and an inventory, and you didn't have to worry about that you were saying the wrong thing. Graphic Adventures transformed everything. But now there's this weird way where I'm stepping back. So I played this game recently. It's a future detective adventure, right? Something about the sea. I'll have to check what it is. Anyway, it's H.P. Lovecraft themed. It's set in the future. It looks like fun. So in the game, you have a Sherlock Holmes style investigation board, and you have to make links to things, right? To try and prove some piece of evidence. And I ended up in this weird thing where I couldn't understand what the game's system wanted me to do, because I found a dead body and they're like, he must have committed suicide, says the people who just want the case to go away. And so I found out that there's this tattoo on the guy's arm that reads sinner, and they're like, must have been guilty about something, and so he killed himself and wrote sinner on his arm with this portable tattoo device. But the thing is, it's written on his left arm, and I've got a piece of paper, or like a photograph of him, showing him signing a document with his left hand, and I know he's left-handed, so he would not have been able to accurately write a word with a tattoo gun on his left arm when he's left-handed, right? So this is the information I know that proves that somebody else wrote that. But the game system is so oblique that it's like we're back in the world of text adventures where it's like, I don't know how to communicate to the game the information that I have figured out.
Mm.
And there were times when I was playing this where I'm like, I know what's going on here, but I felt like I was just going through the motions of following the plot linearly, and I wish I could have, jumped ahead a little. But it is, and that's the thing, the original Alone in the Dark, one of the things that makes it so pioneering, and we'll talk about this when we talk about Alone in the Dark more broadly, is that it is such an open experience. Like, you were given a haunted house to explore, and it is very much made in the format of the classic text adventures where it's like, you figure out what to do. Whereas here, I'm not saying the game is handholdy, but at any given point in this game, you have one place to go to complete one objective, And I guess I was expecting more of an open investigation kind of feel to it. And I think that's why I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. Do you see what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying, but also I was so interested in just trying to learn more of the side stories that I still was poking around a lot. And that's part of the reason that I did actually still enjoy it, because I'm not trying to make this comparison, but one of the things that really annoyed me about Resident Evil 2 Remake is the second you leave Raccoon City Police Station, the world is just so much less interesting.
That is a problem.
The laboratories and sewers are just not compelling environments. There is a reason that Civi 11, famously just lampoons sewers so much.
Yeah.
And it's a little hard to get insight there, whereas Derceto has so many different layers, and while yes, there are places that you can go to besides it, like you said, there's Egypt, there's a couple other locations you get to visit across the game, they're more like a spice, whereas unlocking the various facets of Derceto itself is kind of one of the side quests. Because even when you have unlocked everything for a certain portion, when you come back later, it might be locked again and require that you have to go about things in a different order. And it's very deliberate in ensuring that you get to the right story beats, but it still ensures that, okay, but you've unlocked everything again now, you've seen what you need to see, and you can go back to questing. There's a whole mess of different little achievements and story elements that you can find that deepen the story in ways that just I really, really love.
They definitely reward the player for the amount of work they're willing to put in. That I agree with. I'm not going to fight you on that one. I think you're completely right about that. There is a lot here for people who are willing to look around and read the files and explore the various rooms. There is a lot of extra content that I found pretty interesting.
Speaking of, I just want to also praise that I love that every single text document is so beautifully read. Like, there are voices even just for characters that you'll never see in the game.
Yeah, and a woman died before the start of the story, and we never meet her, but there is a voice actress playing that part when you're reading her journal. That is a really nice touch. I thought, I really enjoyed that a lot. And that's not the only one, right? The same thing with Emily's fiance. Like, you can hear his voice, even though he is not a character in the game. Like, there's nice touches like that make it... They really put in the work acting-wise. And I think that's also true of all of the people who show up. There is a problem... I mean, it's not a big problem, where, like, every character basically just gets one monologue. And then they kind of disappear from the game. Like, there's a bunch of characters wandering around Derceto, but it's like, you meet each one once, they say a bunch of stuff, and then you're basically not going to see them again until the end of the game. You know, it's not like you're doing side quests for characters or getting to know characters better by interacting with them. If you want to learn more about the character, you're going to have to like go to rifle through their rooms and read their journals. And I was expecting more involvement with the other characters since they went to the trouble of putting all of these characters into Seto, but that's not really what the game's interested in.
Well, yes, but also, to be fair to them, it is called Alone in the Dark, not me and my friends in the dark.
You know, for a game called Alone in the Dark, Seto seems to be absolutely packed with people, and most of the game is set during the day.
Yeah, but it's the kind of, golden hour
that's not an exaggeration. Like, most of the game is set during the day. Like, even when you go to alternate places, like, the docks are also set during the day. Obviously, the library is set during the day. So, it's like, the trip to the metaphorical, paddle boat is set during the day. Like, there's a lot of day locations in this Alone in the Dark game.
Yeah, but to be fair to them with that, well, one, I recently had to review a VR game that was obsessed with making everything as dark as possible, and it did not exactly benefit it. And I actually like the lighting they choose, though, because... Well, for one, it actually reminds me of rural living because you really can tell as the sun starts to set and you hit that golden hour and everything. But also, it's the lighting, it might be bright, there might be some sunlight, or it might be the sun setting, but it's never comforting. It's like you're watching sand go through a sieve. Your opportunities to walk away from all of this, your chance to get back to normality is going away. You can tell that when the night finally hits, you are going to be doomed, and you are just always trying to get things sorted before it gets too dark. Like when you're in the graveyard and you can actually see all the downcast shadows, or when you're in Egypt and it almost looks like you're on the verge of an eclipse.
Yeah.
It's some good atmosphere, I would say.
I really did enjoy the Egypt map. I mean, the temple looks great, and the lead up to the temple also looks great. Personally, I was extremely fond of the Antarctic map. I thought that looked gorgeous.
They really surprised me with the flare, and I'm really glad the flare was useful with the boss fight there.
Yeah, it was a nice touch.
I will, however, I know I've been saying a lot of nice things and defending a lot of things. There is one very crucial thing, though, that I will absolutely give Alone in the Dark shit for.
Please.
Someone really, 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 really needed to test the collision physics a lot more. Because... You remember the oil well section?
Of course.
I got stuck on a bench and had to restart it.
Yeah, that happened to me a bunch.
Yeah, it's just like this
happened to me
like
4 times in the game. I got trapped in place, and I'm like, guys, this is a professional AAA release. It should not need an unstick me button, but it definitely needed an unstick me button.
Well, the thing that gets me is there's 2 very specific things here contradicting, because one, they've very clearly programmed it so that you can't jump or fall at all, which for context here, even Dead Space, a game without a jump button, actually has falling animations just for the off chance that you happen to like somehow glitch yourself off of the elevator, and land on the ground or something. Right. This game apparently seems to not have that, but also doesn't have the invisible walls to just say, yeah, no, you can't collide with that.
Yep.
I don't know if like the dodge move was a late incorporation, because it seems to cause it a lot. I one time got stuck on literal stairs because
that's
of
a
the dodge
problem.
Move.
I was able to a couple of times the dodge move out of getting stuck.
Oh yeah, sometimes it will.
Yeah, but sometimes it will get you stuck. It's very strange. Yeah, it's very inconsistent, and you're right. Like, you feel like there should just be big invisible boxes around all of the weird architecture to make sure you're not getting stuck, but I guess they just didn't draw those. It's very frustrating.
So, like, that is probably, like, overall, that is genuinely my biggest complaint because there's more than once that I had to reload a checkpoint purely because someone just didn't go over the level geometry a little bit more.
Yeah,
And
that's bad.
it sucks because it is one of the most immersion breaking things possible for a game that is incredibly good at pulling you in, at setting a specific tone. It just to blow that over something as simple as a bench or literally stairs.
Yeah, the stairs, that didn't happen to me, and I'm lucky because that would be unacceptable. Oh my god, stairs?
Yeah,
Oof.
it's during Egypt, right at the end when it starts to collapse.
When you're doing the escape. Right.
Yeah.
You got stuck on stairs. Damn. Okay, that is unacceptable.
Yeah.
All right. So now I think are you ready to talk endings?
Yes.
All right. Go. You had one you wanted to bring up.
Well, yes. So we've both seen the normal endings, which that's just it. For those who don't know, to get the secret endings, you have to collect all sorts of these neat little doodads throughout the game to experience them, which I always appreciate how they have something like that because it's a nice little bit of replay value. Even Dead Space Remake did that. But yeah, within the case of Alone in the Dark, the normal endings are fine. They're very predictable.
Mm-hmm.
The bad endings, I feel like Emily's bad ending is just kind of, it needed more explanation than we actually got.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a lot of setup for Emily's in the cult now. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it just sort of happens, and they're in Egypt again. But there's something I found really fascinating while playing as Emily, which is when I'm blanking on her name, the flapper girl,
Right.
Ruth.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Ruth. When she is flirting with Emily, which this is the 1920. Just hit into like the 1930s at this point. We're just getting into the Depression in the game, so that's a very scandalous thing. But Emily doesn't actually actively rebuke.
No, not at all.
And later, by the end of her normal ending, like expresses that she wants to stay in touch with her, that she wants to write her.
Yeah.
But obviously, in the normal ending, Ruth gets killed, even though it's not really clear if she's even in the cult. She just kind of seems to be hanging around. But then, in the evil Edward ending, where he becomes part of the cult, Ruth and Emily survive.
I know. Well, actually, everybody survives because they kill Grace.
And you know, I feel awful saying about this because Grace is a little kid, but that kid is a freaking monster. So it's like I'm kind of like, is this? I feel weird that this
feels like the happy ending to you.
It feels like, you know, it's horrible, but also it actually is arguably a better outcome in some ways for a lot of people. It's so weird.
I get it. I get why you would say that the Edward bad ending is in many ways because of the better ending, because they keep the dark god asleep, and you know, only one person has to die to do it, and that one person just has to be an immensely creepy child.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you want to sacrifice Damien from The Omen? Okay, sure.
She is an immensely creepy child. Of course, the best ending in the game, I think, is the Grace ending, where it turns out this is just a fantasy that Grace was having while her parents, Edward and Emily, were just watching a play, roughly about the events of the game. Okay, sure, why not? The whole we just all wasted our time ending that I was talking about. Of course, that's not the best ending, but it's cute that it's in there.
Well, not only that, it's just I kind of like the way that they frame it as both that it was a stage play and like work in some of the meta commentary. Like, Grace suggests the ideas that happened in Alone in the Dark 2 and 3.
Yeah, no, just 2. The Hedge Maze and the Pirates were 2, and she suggests that because that's the game that Grace was a character in.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I knew that she was in the games before. I just was blanking on.
Yeah.
But yeah, just
the whole thing of her being kidnapped and having to be rescued by Edward that takes up the bulk of his flashback is, I mean, it has nothing. It's not anywhere similar to what happens in this game, but that is the plot of 2. She has been kidnapped by some gangsters who are working for some ghost pirates. It's a convoluted game, just to be clear.
Yeah, they really didn't. Back in the day,
you can dress up as Santa to break into a place. It's a very weird game.
But regardless, I like it because they very much. It feels like them taking a bow. It reminds me of Pathologic's ending, actually, like the true ending with Pathologic, where the developers themselves will actually address you as NPCs in their game, and they're like, well, this is why we did this, and we hope that you enjoyed our very weird
Pathologic, of course, is... there is a layer of artificiality in all of Pathologic, because the whole thing is set up at the beginning as a play being presented to you that means something. So it's like there is a layer of artificiality at the core of Pathologic that I think lets them get away with doing that in a way that almost no other game would get away with doing, because most games do not revel in their artificiality from the start the way that does. See what I'm saying?
I realize there's less immediate setup in the Alone in the Dark far as this. I do feel like just the amount of weight and pressure of making a remake to one of the godfathers of the genre.
Yeah.
I feel like having some kind of acknowledgement that we get it. This was us taking our shot at it. We hope you liked it. If not, totally fair. This was us putting on what we thought we should do with this. And it's very humble. That's the other thing I would say is despite the Hollywood actors, despite the arguably really punching above their weight production values overall, face animations aside, there's a lot here that just still feels a lot more passionate and indie-like. Like, even things that are a little bit rougher, like the collision issues and the combat, it reminds me a lot of playing something like... Did you ever play Afterfall?
No, which one's Afterfall?
It is a delisted, what if Red Faction met Resident Evil 4... indie game. It's one of the very first 3D indie games released on Steam.
Huh.
Understand, Afterfall was not this great game or anything. It is an extremely janky game, but still, it had this passionate spirit despite itself. It had
apparently I own Afterfall Insanity Extended Edition.
Oh, then yeah, you actually have one. You are one of the last owners of it.
Okay, well, yay. All right, I'll play this thing. Yeah.
But be warned, it is very weird.
Oh my god, yeah, I tried to go to the store page and there's nothing there. Wow.
But oh gosh, it's been delisted since 2013. But anyway, where I'm going here with this is that just it feels like that kind of a passion project. Like if someone designing that kind of game like Afterfall actually had the talent to deliver, this is what the kind of game I would actually expect them to give you. Because, yeah, I wouldn't expect in, say, a Resident Evil game, one of the bad endings to make you go, I don't know, maybe that is my headcanon ending or not. That's not really something that they would do. There's a lot of things here that I am certain that if this was a little higher budget or if this was a different studio, we never would have seen, like how the puzzles are handled, or how it's all mostly set in one location and evolving, but not friggin' Metroidvania for the 50th time.
That's true. Yeah, it does not have that quality to it at all. One thing I liked, and it goes back to what you were saying about the game feeling humble, is one of the oddest and most meta things about this game is that pretty explicitly the character Jeremy knows that he is a fictional character in a game.
Oh yeah, I love that.
And that everything is wrong because he didn't hang himself in the attic the way he was supposed to. And that has caused everything to go wrong. And I'm like, okay, that's a nice touch.
Yeah. Oh, poor Jeremy. It's just, oh my gosh, someone needs to give him a hug.
Yeah, it's a bad scene. And for the record, no, the lobotomy had not been invented yet when this game is set. In case you're wondering if that was a thing, no, it wasn't yet. It was the end of the 30s. They invented the lobotomy.
Well, it's like when that was what they had you do there during that fight. I was like, okay, I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
This was not my bingo card.
Yeah, to keep the old timey therapy thing going. Yeah, it is weird when you get to the end of the game because you're like, okay, like, did the doctor believe in the monster at all? Or did he think that like allowing them all to be in this cult was just like keeping everything calm, so he was okay with it?
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm not really sure whether he just thought this was a good, like, essentially creating a religion for everyone to obey the rules of was a good way to keep everybody calm, right? It was very strange.
Yeah, it definitely was. He was the one character who I didn't quite follow. Yeah, what all was happening?
What was going on with that guy? Yeah,
I feel like there was like a cut scene or two that would have clarified where he stood on everything. Because especially the endings, it's very hard to tell if he's surprised, if he's just horrified to see things go wrong, and it's a shame because he is creepy as hell.
He really is. Yeah. He's the creepy doctor you want in this type of story. All right. And the weirdest lockup I had, and I'm like, I kept trying to figure out if this is intentional or not. When you go down to the first floor and you unlock the hallway towards the first floor bedrooms the first time, when you first go down there, the dark man walks out of the hallway and looks at you. And if you try to aim your gun at him, you put your gun to your head and can shoot yourself in the head. Oh yeah, I guess you never tried that. If you try to aim your gun at him, the gun goes to your own head instead. It's very strange. But whenever he would go there, the game would completely lock up on me. Like, I thought it was going to break the game, is how bad the lockup was there.
No, I didn't have that issue. I did find it funny though that when my response was basically like, nope, I'm opening this door actually, thanks Mr. Darkman, and he just like popped out of existence in like a blank.
Yeah, for me the rule was if I just hold back on the controller while he's doing his walk in animation, the moment I have control again, I can run away and then he'll disappear and I can just go back to playing the game normally. But it was like one of the weirdest glitches I've encountered. Where it's like, if I stayed and looked at him, there was nothing I could do except shoot myself. And I'm like, is this a glitch or is this intentional? I have no idea. It was a very strange thing, but you were able to walk away too. So there you go. And you never tried to shoot him. So who knows if that was intentional or if I found a glitch. I should go back and test it to see if, now that the game's been patched 3 times, see what happens if I pull a gun on him now. Anyway, something to think about. But yes, the biggest problem with the game's alternate endings, though, is they didn't work when it first came out. They had to be... The game had to be patched a couple of times, because in order to get the endings, you have to get all of the collectibles in, like, both characters' playthrough and then start a new game. And only then do, like, have the conditions been set to go to the places and get the items to get the special endings. Which is a problem. So they're saying, like, to see all the endings, you got to play the game 5 times. Which you might say, well, obviously. But the point is, like, the bad endings you could only get in second playthroughs, which the weird part is, I think lessens your motivation to go and get a bad ending.
I think in some cases, but then I also think about how Silent Hill 3, its only alternate ending is a bad ending, and you really had to either like be horrendous at the game, like to the point that I feel like someone should sit you down with a sippy cup levels of bad at Silent Hill 3.
Right.
And it specifically on a second playthrough be that bad to get it, and yet there are still people who will like triumphantly try to get that. And similarly, Dead Space Remake, that was the whole deal with the alternate ending is you had to track down a little marker for every chapter of the game that is playable, and then until you're just about to leave the ship. Then you had to go back to one specific room and put them all down, mostly just to get some slight dialogue variations and a new, potentially different, potentially the same, depending on how you look at it, cliffhanger ending.
Huh. Weird.
So this is actually kind of just becoming a thing.
Okay. I'll try not to be too hard on it, but I'm not going to pretend I didn't find it a little frustrating. Okay, so let's wrap things up with some final thoughts on the game.
Well, in my case, I'll do you one better. I'll even give a score.
Okay.
For me, this is actually arguably probably a 9.5.
Wow.
Yeah, anyone who's read my past work knows that that's really hard to get from me, but like, I really, really enjoyed it. If the glitches I encountered hadn't come up, if the combat was a little bit better, I probably could just name it as like one of my top picks for the year, like Vampire was for me years ago. Mm-hmm. It's just a little bit short, so I can't quite call it that, but yes, I will, because for me, the numbers don't mean, 10 out of 10 means perfect. No, what that means is I will recommend it to literally any person I see on the street, and this is pretty close to that for me. Like, even when I started booting up the game, I was streaming over Discord to a friend of mine. She is a self-confessed scaredy cat. She does not like to play horror. She's not good at combat or anything like that, but she loved the atmosphere. She's a big fan of Jodie Comer, so she was just like, okay, I want to see this. And after watching just like an hour of it, she's like, okay, I need to watch a Let's Play of this entire thing. Like, there's just so much that is well done here, and it is so distinctly not obsessed with just being a Resident Evil clone. This is not a new Nightmare situation where it's just like, well, Edward Carnaby has long hair now and talks all emo. It's like, no, this
was not a good direction for the series.
Yeah, this is an actual honest to goodness adventure horror game in a way that we rarely see at all anymore. It feels wholly. When I was interviewing the developers, the interview's not up yet. It will be shortly after this recording, though. And one of the things they emphasized to me is they wanted to make sure that this game was like a thesis of what actually is Alone in the Dark, because we've seen so many attempts to restart, to bring it back between New Nightmare, Inferno, Illumination, just so many times they've even the failed PS3 remake that didn't actually happen, or well, it didn't release rather. They have tried, and the thing is, I do think that they nailed it, because we both actually like Inferno, and I still kind of see that soul there, where it's just making design choices deliberately for the core experience that they want the player to have, as opposed to this is a genre expectation. And that really is the defining feature of this game for me, is that it's not trying to be anything else other than Alone in the Dark, and I just have to respect the hell out of that.
Yeah. I completely see your point. And I mean, the reason that I'm a little lower, right, is the reason that I'd put more like a 7.5 is, for me, because I played the original Alone in the Dark when it first came out and I was obsessed with it, and this is going to be such a fiddly thing to complain about, so I apologize in advance to the developers, who I think have done a very good job. It is a gorgeous game. The way they handled the storytelling is, I think, top notch. Absolutely. But when you say to me, what is Alone in the Dark? And my first thought is always going to be something that completely changes the way how I think about video games. Because for me, that's what the original Alone in the Dark did. And my feeling is, if you can't completely change the way, and that's why I never really cared about Alone in the Dark 2 or 3. Because it was just another Alone in the Dark game. And that's why I was so obsessed with Inferno. Because when you play Inferno, you've never played anything like Inferno before. It is a new experience. Inferno is just strange, and it takes all sorts of chances, and it is all over the place, and there's nothing like it out there. It is an open world game set in Central Park about fighting evil plant monsters and stopping Satan from coming out of a cell under Central Park. It is, with lots of driving segments in a horror game. It is the craziest thing you've ever played, and it is crazy and innovative and different in the same way the original Alone in the Dark said, okay, what if we could take all of the freedom and experimentation and you figure out what you're doing of a text adventure and put that in a graphic adventure? And that's exactly what they did. They give you all of these pieces and let you figure out how you're supposed to interact with the world, right? And there are multiple ways to do a bunch of things in the game as a consequence. So that feeling of swinging for the fences with innovation is completely absent here. They're just like, we are going to make the most Alone in the Dark game we can, rather than we are going to completely reset the map of what video games are. And I know it's asking a lot for a game to say, we're going to completely redefine video games every time. But when I hear there's a new Alone in the Dark game, that's what I want to hear that they're doing. I hear that they're taking a chance that nobody has taken before, right? And this doesn't do that. And I think it's really good. I didn't like the combat as much as you did. I thought the combat was great, and the best thing about the game was that there wasn't that much of it. I liked that in Egypt I could just use lasers to kill the Bayaki rather than having to mess with them.
Yeah, that was actually really satisfying.
It was a really nice thing for them to put in. I thought that was a legitimately great touch that I was very happy about. But fundamentally, right, it's not taking these chances, not doing something completely different. And that's why it's not living to me up to the Alone in the Dark name. But you're right, that as an investigative adventure, it feels great and it works better than so many others who have tried to do the exact same thing. And it really does feel like you're doing the investigating. Even in the hand-holdiest, check out this room next mode, it really feels like you're having to do the work in a way that I found very satisfying.
Okay, can I
please.
I want to work in one quick hot take here, and this is, I think, what also helps set my perspective. So right before this, a friend tried to help me out and digitally loan me a login so I could try Alan Wake 2. Okay? I promise you, after playing Alan Wake 2,
I will fall in love with Alone in the Dark.
Oh my gosh, if you think Alone in the Dark is handholdy, Alan Wake 2 is watching the world's longest cutscene that you have to click your way through. I can't overstate how grateful I was that I could fail a puzzle in this game. That I wasn't just doing whatever was in Sam Lake's arguably nicely written script. I was so bored for the first 2 hours of Alan Wake 2 So that really put things into perspective coming into this one. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're assuming I have neurons that fire.
Whereas by comparison, what I did before playing this was replay the original Alone in the Dark, which gives
There
you a
you go.
very different expectation. All right, I think we just figure out our score variance right there. All right, problem solved. Okay, so that's gonna be that. Thank you so much for joining us on this trip through Alone in the Dark. Hopefully we didn't spoil everything between our chatting and the video we've been playing this whole time. We will see you back here when we talk. I don't remember what our next topic is going to be. There was something we want to talk about. You know what? You'll find out very soon because we're posting on the reg. We'll see you back here for that. But until then, I'll say that's right. Au revoir.